All right, Donnie, you played one season at Iowa Central Community College, and then you went to Morehead for 3 years. Where in that window, if it wasn't before then, did you first sort of get the itch that I might like to coach someday?
Well, in high school and then junior college and then at Morehead State, I'm like a lot of these guys that we coach, Jeff. I was going to be an NBA player, and obviously at 5'10" and not a monster athlete, that probably wasn't going to happen. So sometimes I tell my team, you guys are delusional. And probably that's why I relate to these guys so well, because I was pretty darn delusional myself. But I knew I wanted to always be around the game. It was my love. Seriously, probably since I was in fourth grade, I remember scoring my first basket in a seventh grade game, and that was it. I was hooked. But I really planned on being a high school teacher and coach. And I got my degree at Morehead State in secondary ed. I was going to teach history. In my senior year, I did my student teaching, and probably an understatement when I say I did not enjoy the daily teaching of history. And so I said, what else can I do to be around the game every day if I don't want to teach in high school? And fortunately, where I'd played junior college at Iowa Central, my old boss said, hey, why don't you come out here and give it a shot and see if you like it? And so I went back to Iowa Central after I graduated from Morehead. And think about this now, Jeff. Minimum wage back then was $5.15 an hour. And I was living in the dorm. They didn't even give me a meal card. So I had to make some money to pay my phone bill. Back then, no cell phones. So you had your phone bill and some food money. And so I would work security at night, Sunday night through Thursday, 25 hours a week from 11:30 to 4:30 in the morning for $5.15 an hour. And I remember I was engaged to my first wife at the time, and she'd come see me, 4 or 5 times a year, probably, every 6 weeks or so. And she'd come and I'd have to go do security at 11:30 at night. And I had this orange vest I had to wear. And we'd be talking. I'd say, I'm going to be a head Division I coach now. I'm going to make it. And she said, well, I sure hope so, because right now you look like Barney Fife. And we'd laugh. And, so fast forward years later, the dream became reality. But I think there was never any doubt that I wanted to coach basketball. I think the biggest thing was I always anticipated coaching high school. And that changed, as I mentioned, when I did my student teaching.
So you're 23, 24, you're immersed in this basketball job that I'm assuming you just love being a part of right from the jump. And then, oh, by the way, you have another 25 hours that you're working the overnight at security. There's not a whole lot of extra time in your life, I would imagine, at that point.
No, there wasn't. But, I've told people this, and it literally started from that year. I've never worked a day in my life. What I do in regard to coaching basketball and being around the game every day, that's not work. And so to me, the 25 hours a week was work, but the other 60 hours, 65 hours we were putting in coaching and working guys out and recruiting, it wasn't work. It was my passion and something I absolutely fell in love with. So I enjoyed every second of it. And I remember my junior college boss at the time, who I also played for, Dennis Pilcher, he went on to win over 800 games and is in the Junior College Hall of Fame. Just an incredible coach. And he told me, he said, Coach, you're going to make it. You're going to be a star someday. But I'm telling you, you'll look back one day and enjoy these days as much as any. And he could not have been more right. He was a prophet in that regard, because I look back on those days and it was just 2 years, but he and I had so much fun. It was just him and I coaching and recruiting, and we'd go on trips and we'd laugh and cut up and just have an amazing time. And so I look back on those days, and they were so fun and so important. I'm so appreciative that Coach Pilcher gave me the opportunity to do what I love to do. But it was never work.
1996, you go to St. Catherine Junior College as a head coach. You're 26 years old. How did that opportunity arise? And I mean, you'd only been an assistant for 2 years out of your playing days. How did you feel like you How did you come to the decision that you thought you were ready to be a head coach of a program?
Well, I've always been one of those guys, even going back to high school, that I basically helped coach the team. And then at Morehead, I was not a great player at all, but my teammates looked up to me as kind of a coach on the floor, if you will. And then Coach Pilcher gave me a ton of freedom in my 2 years there, where I really grew and developed and had the confidence that I was ready. And, actually, when I got the job, I was 24, Jeff, and turned 25 during that year. I was the youngest coach in the country, and it all fell into place. Just a small coincidence, but a guy I got to know through Mark Godfrey, because when I was at Iowa Central, Mark signed a kid at Murray named DJ Dahl from us at Iowa Central. And I got to know Mark real well. And then I met a mutual friend through him named Mike Wiles. And Mike's a big Murray State guy, he and his wife, Sandra. And we became friends. But Mike called me when I was at Iowa Central. He said, "Hey, I don't know if you'd have any interest, but this St. Catherine job is open." So Billy Donovan was also a friend of mine. And Billy had just got the head coach at Marshall position, but he had been at Kentucky. And the president at St. Catherine College was Governor Martha Lane Collins, who obviously had been the governor at Kentucky, and Coach Donovan knew her a little bit. So Billy reached out and called her on my behalf, and she brought me in for an interview. I was 24 years old and got the job. And I remember it's kind of a funny story, but I couldn't start until July 1 because of the fiscal year at a place like that, you understand. But I started June 1st so I could get in there and start recruiting my team. I was living in the dorm, just trying to make it happen. And I was there about a month, maybe two, and Governor Collins left to go be the vice president at Georgetown College. And so Sister Marina Givens, sweetest old lady in the world, took over, and she called me to the office and she said, "Now, Coach, Governor Collins never really told me what they were going to pay you. So I'm trying to get your contract in order here. What did she say she was going to pay you?" I said, "Well, she's going to pay me $19,000. And she goes, "Well, Coach, I think you're definitely worth 20. So we're going to get." So I got $1,000 bump in my first month or so on the job. And I look back at it, and Mike Wiles, my buddy there in Murray, he knows this story. But when I got the Tennessee job, obviously you're making pretty good money. And I was making after taxes in about a week what I was making in my first year at St. Catherine. So he called and we joked about that. He said, you're a little bit more than your first job at St. Catherine, right? But Coach Donovan was a big part of that. Mike Wiles, if he doesn't tell me about the job, I never even apply for it. So that's how all that fell into place.
You're 24, you're trying to get your first head coaching job. Do you remember anything about that interview? I mean, were you terrified? Were you sort of maybe unnecessarily confident going in there? I mean, how did you get through it?
I go back to what I told you about being delusional. I just thought that's how it's supposed to happen. And, I was confident and probably had no idea what I was doing. But I remember coming out of the interview, and my wife had went with me, and she was actually sitting out in the car waiting on me while I interviewed. And it lasted a couple hours. So I come back out the car, and she goes, "Well, how'd it go?" And I said, "I'm going to get the job. I'm going to get the job." Just oblivious to how hard it is or how lucky and fortunate you have to be. But I just felt like it went well. Obviously, in hindsight, I think Billy calling her meant more than my interview. But I felt like it went well. And, again, Coach Pilcher giving me the freedom to grow and develop under him. I just was confident that I was ready. And fortunately, she gave me the opportunity. When I got the Morehead State job, I invited her back. She was at the press conference from when I got the Morehead job. And I thanked her a couple times there, because I'll never forget the opportunity she gave me at 24 years old. Now that's hard to come by.
The one part about junior college recruiting and talking to coaches over the years is it's almost a two-way street in terms of you're recruiting kids into your program, but they're only there for 2 years. And it's almost like you recruit them in, and then you're trying to recruit them out and trying to help them find landing spots if there is another one for them in their journey. What kind of challenge does that present to any coach, let alone a 24 or 25-year-old just kind of getting their feet wet still?
Well, I think, looking back on it, it was exciting. I love to recruit, in the passion and in the excitement of putting a team together. To this day is one of my favorite parts of coaching. Do we need another 5-man, or should we take a power forward? Do we need a backup point guard or a third string point guard, or should I take this shooter? And all those things that come with putting a team together, I've always kind of thrived on and enjoyed doing. Now, the hardest part is blocking out the next level for those young guys to get them to focus on the task at hand and what you're trying to get them to do, which is to win games and play well. And I thought we had a good balance. We had certain rules back then. There weren't cell phones, so the coaches had to talk to a coach, and the coach would get the kid on the phone, and that way they weren't calling late at night at the dorm and different things to distract them from their academics and stuff. So there's a balancing act there. But it's also a really good motivational piece, Jeff, because you can tell guys, look, so and so's coming in tomorrow. You don't practice better and harder than you're practicing right now, son. You won't check in the game tomorrow night. And so you kind of always kept that carrot out in front of them, like, you can think you're not going to work hard today, or you can think you're not going to work hard this week, whatever it may be. All you're doing is hurting yourself, man, because your recruitment is going to be predicated on how well you do here. So we used a little give and take in that regard. But looking back on it, as I was handling my junior college players and some of the guys that helped me later on advance my career, that's how I got to know Billy Donovan. He recruited the kid at Iowa Central. That's how I got to know Mark Godfrey. He recruited and signed the kid from Iowa Central. And then when I was at St. Catherine's, I get to know Bill Self and Kelvin Sampson, and then took a player with me to LSU with Coach Brady. So all that networking and the relationships you build as they're recruiting your players, especially as a young guy, really benefited me.
Your only year at St. Catherine, you take them to the junior college national tournament. And at the time, at least, may still be true, the youngest coach in junior college history to take a team to the national tournament. What was that year like? Obviously, you guys just, I don't know, as big of a dreamer as you could be. I don't know that. Did you dream that big at the beginning, that you thought we can get all the way to the end?
I did. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just the way I'm built. The national tournament is always in Hutchinson, Kansas. Every year, has been for 60, 70 years, whatever it's been. And so every huddle that we broke that year, we'd say 1, 2, 3. And then our word was Hutch. That's Hutch for the Hutchinson, Kansas. That was our goal. And, we started our first team meeting. That the school had never in the history of the school been to the national tournament. And that was the goal. And that was the mindset. And the thing about it, that year, the defending national champion, who was Sullivan Community College out of Louisville, had everybody back from the team that had won the national championship the year before. And they were preseason number 1 in the country. So not only did we have goals of getting there, but we were going to have to go through the best team in America to do it. And lo and behold, we did. And another funny story, but the school had never been to the national tournament. So obviously you don't have a much of a budget at that level anyways, but they didn't have it in the budget to travel to the national tournament. You got to get buses, you got to get hotel rooms, there's food, and there was nothing there. So literally we win the regional tournament, and we come back, and our president said, look, I'm going to get a bus donated from this company. I've already talked with them, so the bus is in place, but we got to do some fundraising here over the next week to get us there. So our team literally, Jeff, now think about this, just won the regional tournament. We're 30-3 on the season, ranked number 6 in the country. And we did 3 bucket drops that week. We were in our little town of Springfield on street corners as cars pull up to the stop sign, because I don't even think there's any stoplights in Springfield. And we're getting money donated from the people in the community to help pay for food and hotel rooms. So it was an amazing year. I look back on it as a 25-year-old kid, and to win 30 games in your first year, and all the great things we did, and to rally that community around us. They'd never seen or been a part of anything like that. Then to have to raise the money to get there. I mean, that might have been the best year of my entire coaching career. It was incredible.
1997, Dale Brown, the legendary LSU coach, is done at LSU, and John Brady takes over, and he hires Donnie Tyndall. How did the junior college success have anything to do with it? Did it put your name on a radar, or was this just a relationship-based deal that helped? I mean, you go from little old St. Catherine now, and you're jumping into the deep waters of the SEC.
Well, I wish I could say it was based on my coaching and the great wins we had, but in reality, it was a relationship. Kermit Davis was the head coach at Idaho, and Coach Davis had just taken the associate head coaching job with Coach Brady at LSU. And Coach Davis had been recruiting a couple of my players, so got to know me that year. And I had the best point guard in the country, a kid named DeJuan Collins, and they needed a point guard. And Kermit said, look, I think this guy could get us DeJuan if you hire him in the third spot. And he flew in like the day after getting the job, sat down and met with me, watched DeJuan play, offered me the job, and DeJuan was going to do whatever I suggested he did. And so he signed at LSU, and I go there as the third assistant at 25 years old. I was the youngest assistant in SEC. And I'll be forever indebted to Coach Davis and Coach Brady, because again, here I am 25 years old, 2 years as a JUCO assistant, 1 year as a junior college head coach. So only been coaching 3 years, and for them to give me the opportunity to be a full-time assistant coach in the SEC at 25 years old, you know, I could never repay those guys for that opportunity.
We've seen it. Sometimes you get family members, you know, hey, we'll find a spot for dad on the staff, or an uncle if a player can end up on campus. Is the coach and a player coming together, that's sort of being handcuffed together and joining a new team / staff? Is that more common than maybe the layman would think?
Well, you know, they put some different rules in over the years to kind of try to eliminate people getting hired to bring a player. But, you know, it's actually pretty common. You know, I tell people this: Roy Williams, when he went to North Carolina with Dean Smith, brought a player. I think it was Brad Doherty. So there's been a ton of guys over the years to get their opportunity by bringing a player. And I certainly was never ashamed of that. I mean, I look back on it, and there's been a ton of people get their opportunities that way. And I was offered other jobs. You know, Kelvin Sampson offered me an assistant spot at Oklahoma to bring DeJuan. And I had some other opportunities, but that's the one I felt like at the time was best for me and best for DeJuan. And, you know, it worked out. Coach Brady has said over the years, DeJuan was a good player and did some good things, but the best part of that deal was getting Donnie Tyndall. Now, I don't know if he really meant that, but at least he's on record of saying that. So that was always cool. And I think, you know, with my work ethic and my passion for the game, and them giving me the opportunity, I think they quickly saw it wasn't a bad hire, that I could definitely do the job. And I remember saying I was 25 when I got the job. And after a year or two, I said, you know what? I'm going to come back to this league and be the youngest head coach in this conference someday. And again, I hope none of that comes across the things I'm saying as being arrogant. I think anyone that knows me knows I'm a pretty humble person, but that was just my mentality and mindset coming up. Again, probably delusional, Jeff, to some extent, but I also tell my players to this day, if you don't have big goals and big dreams, you're not going to reach them. So you might as well set them high and see what shakes out. And again, forever indebted to Coach Brady and Coach Davis for the opportunity they gave me at LSU.
What was the biggest immediate difference that you noticed in recruiting for LSU as opposed to St. Catherine College?
Well, you know, And in the role I had, I wasn't super involved with recruiting. Butch Pierre on our staff did probably 80% of the recruiting. I was more of a guy that laid some groundwork. Back then you did mail outs every day, and you called some underclassmen to build the relationship. And then eventually Coach Pierre and Coach Brady would take it over. I was more of the workout guy. Coach Davis and I did every other scouting report. I handled probably 80% of the individual skill development stuff in the fall and spring. And then I handled a lot of the players on campus, whether it was with school or getting them here, there, and everywhere, all the things that come with getting your players where they're supposed to be. So the recruiting part of it, I think the biggest thing was the level of player number one, of course, and then the resources you have to go see players. I mean, when I was at St. Catherine, we didn't even have a recruiting budget. Like, it was zero in that line. You didn't have a recruiting budget. So you worked the phones, or you spent your own money to go see a kid work out. So that was cool. But I think the biggest thing that was so different for me is I thought I knew the game a little bit. I won 30 games in my first year as a head coach. So I think I got a few answers, and the attention to detail, the teaching, the basketball that I learned so quickly within a month or two from Coach Brady and Coach Davis. Like, it's unexplainable how much I learned in such a short period of time. Things I thought I knew, I was clueless about, and so the basketball aspect and the attention to detail and the importance of following up in all aspects was probably the biggest thing I learned, and I learned it in a hurry.
Being so young, and jaded is such a strong word and probably not the right word, but when you do this long enough, and you walk into, the big arenas and the big schools, I'm sure it's like, okay, we're back, we're back at Kentucky, we're back at Thompson Bowling, we're back, and it's just part of the job. But in those mid-20s, and again, you're literally months removed from playing in tiny gyms and in front of probably tens and tens of people, to now you're in the SEC, going to some of the cathedrals of college basketball. You go to the Sweet 16 in 2000. I mean, just the fan part of your heart. I mean, you enjoyed that?
That's a tricky question, because I didn't. I think I enjoyed one day of that journey. I don't think I enjoyed the process. Like, it's such a blur, Jeff. Like, you have so many things on your plate every day, and you got this list, you're just trying to check them off and get the next one done, that you don't have time to enjoy it. And it was a tough situation, because we were taking over LSU, where they were on NCAA probation. They had limited our scholarships. So, like, every day you're just fist fighting to get players and get your guys where they're supposed to be and follow up on academics. And we got weights at 3 and practice at 4. And it's my scout that's got to be prepared by Tuesday night, and it's Sunday. And so, like, you literally don't have time to enjoy it or think about it from a fan perspective. I remember we're getting ready to play Texas in the second round of the NCAA tournament to go to the Sweet 16. They had a great team. They had a big 7-foot kid named Chris Mam. And I mean, they were good, really good. And it was my scout. And, we're getting ready. I got about 24 hours to prepare this thing and get it presented to the team. And we got less than 48 hours before we play. And I mean, this can change everybody's lives if you go to the Sweet 16 in year 4. And I never felt any pressure. I never felt any excitement. I never felt any being overwhelmed. It was just like, okay, this is what we do. Next game, next arena, next team, and let's roll. So I guess in hindsight, probably one thing I'd say about my entire career is I didn't enjoy it enough. I remember we beat Louisville in the NCAA tournament when I was at Morehead, and like, I'm just ready to play Richmond, saying, God, this is really a team we can beat to go to the Sweet 16. So, back to the LSU days, I didn't enjoy it. I wish I would have more, Jeff. But it's just at that level, you don't have time. It's just on to the next game, the next recruit, the next season.
2001, you leave LSU to go to Idaho. Leonard Perry hires you as an associate head coach. From the newspaper articles, from back then. Said Leonard Perry went to an old friend and hired Donnie Tyndall. So how was that relationship with Leonard Perry, and where did that start?
Well, I got to know Leonard through Coach Davis, Kermit Davis. Leonard played for Kermit at Idaho. And so I got to know Leonard over the years. And at the time, he was a rising star. He was on Larry Eustace's staff at Iowa State as his associate head coach. And I was the third assistant at LSU. And so he wanted to hire me as his associate head coach. It was a pay raise, an opportunity for me to get on the road and recruit even more. And I was just there 1 year. I loved it, enjoyed my time with Leonard. We're still friends to this day. He's the head coach at Pacific now. And we had a top 25 recruiting class at Idaho. So I think that was probably at the time of my career where I started to evolve as a recruiter and kind of make a name for myself as a guy that out on the road could get some players and make things happen in regard to recruiting.
What makes a good recruiter? And can you make a recruiter, or are you born a recruiter?
I think I would lean toward more being born a recruiter. You certainly can work at it, and there's different guys that maybe have a somewhat of a dry personality or a little bit laid back or aloof, if you will, that still have had success in recruiting. I think the biggest thing is number one, you have to have incredible work ethic, because recruiting never ends. It's never over. Once you get that kid done, it's on to the next one or the next class or whatever it may be. So your work ethic has to be off the charts. And I think the next thing is people have to believe you're genuine and think you're genuine in building relationships. You can build relationships with people and follow up and network and all the things you have to do. But if at the end of the day, they don't think you're a genuine person, they're probably not going to trust their player and or child to go play for you. So I think my personality in regard to people liking me and me being able to get along and articulate things that are important and them believing it because they do think I'm a genuine person is probably two of the biggest things.
Well, after 1 year, Idaho, you stayed in the family. Kermit Davis goes to Middle Tennessee as the head coach and brings you back there. How, even in a year apart, how was Kermit? Was he different, I guess, as opposed to being a first lieutenant, maybe with John Brady there at LSU, to being the guy at Middle? How did that relationship change, and how did you have to navigate the relationship?
Well, Coach Davis was Coach Brady's right-hand man at LSU. So he was very involved in coaching. He was involved in recruiting. He was heavily involved in game planning. So he wasn't a whole lot different moving from the associate head coaching job there to being the head coach. And I'd worked with him at LSU for 4 years. So I knew his personality and what he was about and his passion and how basketball-wise, in my opinion, he's a genius. And so it wasn't a big jump or transition for him. He'd already been a head Division I coach. So I think for me, the fact that I'd worked with him for 4 years, knew what he was about, the type of person he was, a family man that he was, the way he took care of me and helping me get the LSU job with Coach Brady sold me, because I actually was offered Kermit's job to go back to LSU with Coach Brady. And I turned that down to go with Kermit to Middle Tennessee, and don't regret a day of it. The initial plan we talked was, hey, let's go here, rebuild this thing for 4 or 5 years. And if he's fortunate enough to move on and get a bigger job, which eventually happened for him, we'll get this thing to you, turn it over to you, Donnie. So that was the plan that was in place. I ended up getting the Morehead job before that. But I was very, very appreciative to be part of the Middle Tennessee turnaround with Coach Davis for 4 years. Learned a ton. Again, he let me get out and recruit. We had good players, and we did a lot of good things in our 4 years there. And again, you probably don't enjoy it like you should, because that was a great place to live and good people, friends I have to this day in that community still. But it was a lot of fun working with Coach D and doing our thing there at Middle.
Is it important? I mean, really, that 10-year run from the start at LSU to Idaho to Middle, you were with people you were familiar with, if not close with. And I know that's a lot of the job, and that's a lot of how you guys get jobs is the relationships that you've had. But is there any benefit to going somewhere fresh, just getting different maybe ideas and thoughts and visions of things in terms of trying to create your own philosophies on the game, or is it more beneficial, do you think, to stay in, I don't know if cocoon's the right word, but with those folks that you know before it's time to leave the nest?
Well, I think there's certainly benefits to both. There's nothing wrong with spreading your wings and learning from other people and learning different styles of play. And, in some instances, you can go work for somebody and learn what not to do, which is just as valuable sometimes as learning what to do. But I think the thing that's really important as an assistant is to align yourself with people that have the same core values that maybe you do. And I've always been an intense, fiery, hard charging guy, passionate, intense. And Coach Brady and Coach Davis are the same way. Leonard Perry, Coach Perry, same way. And so now every day you go to work, at least in your mind, you're aligned and you're on the same page with the person you're working for. I've had assistants leave me over the years, Jeff, and they think, well, Donnie's so demanding and he's tough and he's on our tail and da 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 da. And then they go somewhere else where it's not as intense, it's not as demanding. The players aren't held quite as accountable. The coaches aren't held quite as accountable. And they're calling me saying, man, I didn't always enjoy it, but that shit worked for you, man. It works. And so when I'm working for Coach Brady and Coach Davis and Coach Perry, those are all guys that think like me, or I think like them. They're intense, they're demanding, they hold people accountable. And in most instances, as you know, Jeff, in this business, that's what it takes to be successful. So even though I stayed within that family, me thinking like them or them thinking like me was perfect for me, because it just kind of reinforced my beliefs and what could help make you successful. Great learning experiences from all three. Would not give up any of those experiences for anything. And all three of those guys really helped form and shape me to the coach I became.
2006, Kyle Macy's out at Morehead State. And how does that get on your radar? How does that become, this is one I want to go after?
Well, I'm not ashamed or afraid to say this, but as crazy as this sounds, Morehead State was my dream job. And I stayed in touch when I was a player there. I stayed in touch in particular with Coach Wayne Martin, former Morehead coach. He didn't coach me, but we had met. I stayed in touch with Coach Martin. There were several people in that community. Perry Allen, a local banker. Bob Neff, a local banker. I mean, I could go down the list. People on campus, from Dr. Ted Pass, who was a professor, and Bill Redwine, who ran some services there on campus. I stayed in touch with all those people for over a decade. And in the back of my mind, if that job were to ever open and I had a chance to be involved, maybe, those people I mentioned became true friends, but also those are people that maybe would swing the bat for me if and when the time was right. And so that job had been on my radar. And when Kyle's contract wasn't renewed and it came open, I certainly tried to jump right in there and call on some people to help me. And fortunately, they did. And fortunately, I was able to get to my dream spot. I know that sounds crazy. People say, come on now, Morehead, Kentucky. But it really was. I felt like since I played there, the right person with the right mentality at that place, you could win there. Even though it hadn't been done in a long time, I truly felt like you could be successful there.
Was that the first head coaching job, Division I job that you interviewed for?
No, I actually, I interviewed for the Northwestern State job in Louisiana when I was 27. I interviewed at the UT. I interviewed it for the UT Martin job when Brett Campbell got it. I was 28. And I interviewed for the Murray State job when Mick Cronin got it. I was like 29. So I'd had some experience and been through that. And again, as I said, my name had kind of got on that radar of an
Sure.
up and coming young head coach possibility. And so I'd had some interviews, and and then the year before I got Morehead, I interviewed at Southeastern Louisiana, which I thought I had that one, and ended up not getting that too. So I'd had 4 or 5 different opportunities to interview, and fortunately, Morehead State gave me the opportunity. I think I just wowed them. In that Morehead interview, Jeff.
But the whole point about college coaching, and really the point about this podcast, is that, you guys have to grind for decades, sometimes before you get that head coaching job. And here you are. And yes, you had gotten some pedigree of, I'm an assistant at an SEC school and whatever, but to interview it for Division I head coaching jobs at 26, 27, 28, I mean, you were really trying to get around the curve there a little bit, right?
Well, no question. And I think, again, that goes back to my personality and how I'm built, and probably, I keep using this word, but probably delusional as to how it could play out. But again, it ended up happening. And if you don't think that way, and you don't believe in yourself, and you don't try to create opportunities, then you may never get the opportunity. And I know how fortunate I was at 35 years old to be a head Division I coach. I look at guys that were on my staff. There's a guy that hits home with you because he played at Morehead State, Chris Shoemate. Shoe's probably the best assistant I've ever had, or certainly one of the top 2 or 3 that, I mean, he's got it all. He can coach. He's great with people. He's a great recruiter. He's good on the floor. Like, there's no aspect that he doesn't have. And he's going on 40 and not got a head coaching job yet. And as good as he is, there's guys out there that get into their 50s and never get an opportunity. So I know in hindsight, and I even knew then, how fortunate I was to get the opportunity. You have to be so lucky. And then once you're lucky, you better be good, or you're not going to keep it very long. That's just the reality of it.
Was there any hesitancy to go home of sorts to Morehead State? I know you said it's a dream job, but are there some built-in challenges when you are returning to a place that you once played at, going back to the alma mater? Is that could there have been any other school that maybe it would have been easier, or is it maybe the relationships that you talked about, the folks that maybe speed up that the honeymoon portion of the program there when you're going to a place that you've been before?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, I had 2 or 3 people in the profession I really respected say, Donnie, are you sure you want to do this one? Because you're on the radar. You're going to be a head coach at some point in time. You and Kermit are having success at middle, but no one had ever moved from there. I was the first head coach, and still the only head coach, to move from Morehead State to a better job. The only one ever. And the only coach that ever really won there before me was Coach Martin. And that had been 25 years ago. They'd not played in a conference championship game in 25 years. And I'm not talking about won it, not played in a championship game. So from some other people's viewpoint, they thought I should have waited. Me personally, just like I thought at St. Catherine, and just like I thought, I could be a head coach when I was 25, saying I'll be the youngest head coach in this league someday. There was no doubt at all. I was so excited. I can't tell you, to this day, when I think about it, I get goosebumps. I was ready to rock and roll, and somehow, some way, I was going to get Morehead State back to the NCAA tournament, and we were going to get that community involved, and we were going to build a winner. And again, call it dumb, call it delusional, I don't know, but that was my mentality. So I could not have been more excited.
Donnie, last question for the young up and coming coach that maybe at 26 isn't going to end up as a third assistant in the SEC, but knowing how long this journey can be, and the grind that it can be into eventually getting that Division I head coaching job, what advice would you give for that early 20-something, maybe even early 30-something that's still trying to climb the ladder in terms of eventually getting to run their own program?
Well, I was told this line when I was 24 years old by Tom Kelsey, who was Mark Gottfried's assistant. I'm sure you remember Tom. And it has stuck with me to this day. And it's simply this: prepare yourself, don't position yourself. And so many young coaches, you do all the things I did. Now, don't get me wrong. You got to network with the Mark Gottfrieds, the Billy Donovans, the Bill Selfs, in hopes that one day maybe they help you because of the relationship you have. So that is important. But preparing yourself for that opportunity rather than just positioning yourself to get it is what really matters, because you can know Billy Donovan, you can know Mark Gottfried, and you can know John Wooden, and you get a job. But if you haven't prepared yourself and you're not ready for that job when you do land it, you're going to fall on your face. And to this day, that would be the number one thing I tell young coaches. Like, it doesn't matter if it's in the 9th grade game, the JV game, your varsity game, a junior college game. Like, you have to prepare every day like you're a Kentucky, Kansas, Duke. It doesn't matter. And you have to try to learn and grow every day, because when you get your chance, you're going to have to be able to draw up plays. You're going to be able to have your terminology for your entire staff to use. You're going to have a recruiting plan. You're going to have to, all the things that you have to have, and that comes through preparation. And if you're not prepared, you can position yourself, but it's not going to work. So that would be my biggest thing right there.